Alright guys, so this is a super important lesson. Make sure you get this, alright? If you have any questions throughout, write them in the margins or any comments or whatever, and make sure that you ask them for next class, okay? So, solving multi-step basically just means it requires more than one step. You're more than just adding or just multiplying. You have to do combinations of things. Alright, most people have trouble understanding what order to do the combination of things. So you remember our PEMDAS acronym? This was our order of operations. Well, when you're solving, you are many times going to use this backwards. Alright, not always, but a lot of the time. Alright, it's a good rule of thumb to work your way backwards. So start with this, what can you add or subtract, then what can you multiply or divide, then exponents and square roots are inverses, which you don't need to worry about now. But working backwards, okay, so that's what I mean by work backwards. I also will say a lot of times work from the outside in. Alright, so here's our x. What's most tightly associated with that? The 5 is. Alright, so that's the last thing we're dealing with. Alright, the 3 is less closely associated with the x, so we're going to deal with that first. Alright, so here we go. This is solving multi-step equations. Using this idea of working backwards, we're going to add or subtract first. We're going to minus that 3. Whatever we do to one side, we must do to the other. Okay. And the reason I subtract the 3, because that eliminates the 3. Now my left-hand side is simpler than it was. I'm that much closer to having x all by itself. Gives me 20 over here. Now I divide by 5, divide by 5. Notice that every time I do this, I'm keeping my equal signs lined up. I'm writing the step on both sides. I didn't just write the minus 3 here. I wrote it both sides so I didn't forget to do it. And I'm doing, and whatever I didn't change, I brought down. I want you to do all these steps. Keeping your work neater is going to get you the right answer much more frequently. Okay, so if I've done this long and I'm still showing all my work, you definitely should as well. Alright, so minus 5, and that gives us just an x over 4 here, equals 1 minus 5 is a negative 4. Alright, so now it's just like the single step. Now we only have one step left to do. If I'm dividing by 4, the opposite of that would be multiplying by 4. So I have x equals negative times a positive is negative. 4 times 4 is 16. Alright, similar step here. Minus 18, and that gives me negative 4v equals positive 24. Divide by a negative 4. Now notice I divided by a negative, alright, because this is a negative 4 here that's multiplying the v. So I have to do a negative divided by a negative gives me the positive v. So that would be a, that reduces and gives me just v equals negative 6. Alright, positive divided by a negative is negative. Alright, so here, working our way backwards, what I'm going to do first is add the 7. So that eliminates, I get 3/4 q equals 15. Now, remember from our last lesson, if you got a fraction, you're really just multiplying by the reciprocal, multiplying by it flipped over. So I do that on both sides. So 4 over 4 reduces, 3 over 3 reduces, so I have just a q equals, this is like a 15 over 1. So when I multiply fractions, I multiply the tops, I get 15 times 4 is 60. Multiply the bottoms, and I get 1 times 3 is 3. And 60 divided by 3 equals 20. So q equals 20. Alright, let's see a few more examples that have a little bit more going on with them. So here, I don't multiply by 3 first, because if I did that, I'd have to multiply both these things by 3, and usually people forget to do that. So I'm going to add 4. Alright, and that makes it simpler. So I have negative h over 3 equals 13 over 4 is 17. Alright, so this is like the ones we did before, but there's a negative here now. Alright, that's why we did so many examples, so you can see all the little different quirks. So here I'm going to multiply, of course, by a 3 to get the h by itself. But since it's a negative here, I got to multiply by a negative 3. That way I have a negative times a negative is a positive h. That's what I want. Alright, and since I multiplied by a negative 3 here, I gotta multiply by a negative 3 on the other side as well. So that gives me a negative 51. Dunsky. Alright, now here, you cannot add first. You can't just add a 7 because that 7 is being divided by 5. Alright, so that is definitely way illegal. Not allowed. Alright. So what you have to do in this case first, since the whole thing, this whole thing, is being divided by a 5, you have to multiply both sides by 5 first to cancel that out. Okay, so remember this. So that leaves me with 5 divided by 5, leaves me with just 3k minus 7. And then 16 times 5 is 80. Alright, now it's just like my problems before. So I add 7. Working my way from the outside in, right? This is the most outside, then the 7, then the 3. So it gives me 3k equals 87. Divide by 3, and it gives me k equals 29. Notice all these are coming out to integers, to whole numbers, right? Positive or negative whole numbers. It's not a rule. They don't have to. It just tends to be easier to show you how to do the steps when we're not constantly getting the calculator out. So here we said that you may have to also combine like terms or distribute. So those are our next two examples. Here we have a 2n and a 3n. That gives me 5n plus 7 equals negative 41. Alright, now I subtract the 7. And that gives me 5n equals negative 48. Alright, that doesn't divide evenly. And just to check, negative 48 divided by 5. Oh wait, why am I doing that? Right, I gotta divide by 5 here. Alright, so that gives me an n over here. And what does that equal? Equals, well, negative 48 over 5 is reduced. Or if you like decimals better, you can get the decimal. Negative 48 divided by 5 equals negative 9.6. Okay? That's fine to get decimals. That happens. Right? As long as you're doing all your steps correctly, well, that's what the answer is. So here we have to distribute. Alright? And it's a negative 3 out front. That sign has to go with the number. So I'm distributing the negative to both things. So the negative 6 tags along. Negative 3 times 2k is negative 6k. Negative 3 times 4, this is where a lot of people forget the sign. Negative times a positive is a negative 12 equals 18. So now I can combine like terms. Alright. And that gives me a negative 6. Numbers are like terms. So negative 6 and negative 12 is negative 18. Minus 6k equals 18. Now I just follow my steps. Add that to eliminate. That gives me negative 6k equals 18 plus 18 is 36. And then divide by negative 6 so that the negatives cancel. Divide by negative 6. K equals 36 divided by negative 6 is negative 6. Alright, so if any of those were confusing, pause it, rewind, go back and watch them a couple times. Make sure you understand all those examples. And, oh yeah, a couple more problems. Here's your U-tries. You can do that